Welcome everybody to the June 21st, 2022 meeting of the Salem Planning Commission. Shelby, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Ekus.
Here.
Commissioner Goebel.
Here.
Commissioner Griggs.
Here.
Commissioner Levin.
Here.
And Commissioner Slater.
He's here.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was on mute. I am here.
Okay, we have a quorum.
In my entire head this time.
We see your whole head. That's awesome.
Yeah, how about that? Aren't you lucky?
Yeah. Thank you, Shelby. We have a quorum. Moving through item 3, public comment. We don't have any for that section. We'll move to the consent calendar. Commissioner Slater, do you have a motion?
I do, and I don't have it in front of me, but I move the minutes of
June 7th.
June 7th. Thank you. I move the minutes of June 7th for adoption.
And then do we have a second? And then I'll ask Commissioner Goebel a question.
Second by Levin.
Thank you. And Commissioner Goebel, I believe you indicated earlier that you had reviewed.
I did, yes.
Okay, super. Shelby, would you call the roll, please? Signify by saying, discussion on the motion. Didn't think so. Shelby, would you call the roll? Signify by saying aye if you're in favor of the motion, nay if you are opposed.
Commissioner Ekus.
Aye.
Commissioner Goebel.
Aye.
Commissioner Griggs.
Aye.
Commissioner Levin.
Aye.
And Commissioner Slater.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion passed. Moving on to section 5, the public hearings. I'll open a hearing on item 5.1 as CPZ ZC 22-03 for 4650 and 4680 Hazel Green. Before we begin, does anybody have any ex parte contacts or potential conflicts or actual conflicts of interest to declare?
I do.
Okay.
I'm going to recuse myself from this hearing because it's an AKS project.
Got it. Anybody else? Okay, and then Shelby, would you read the statement of criteria, please?
This is a public hearing to consider a minor comprehensive plan change and zone change, case number CPC ZC 22-03 for property located at 4650 and 4680 Hazel Green Road Northeast. The criteria applicable to this application are found in the Salem Revised Code, SRC, Chapter 260.045B for land use designations. Failure to raise an issue prior to the close of the public hearing with statements or evidence sufficient to afford the Planning Commission and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue precludes appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals, LUBA, on that issue. A similar failure to raise constitutional issues relating to proposed conditions of approval precludes an action for damages in circuit court. Prior to the conclusion of the hearing, any participant may request an opportunity to present additional evidence or testimony. The Planning Commission will then either continue the public hearing or leave the record open for at least 7 days.
Thank you, Shelby. Ms. Cole, are you ready for a staff presentation?
Yes, just one moment. Let me get my screen shared. All right. Good evening, commissioners. I'm Pamela Cole, and I am the case planner for this comprehensive plan change and zone change case 2203 for the property on Hazel Green Road Northeast. And I'd like to introduce the staff report attachments and presentations into the record. So the subject property is currently also in part of an application with annexation case number 749. And it has special criteria from chapter 260 and table 261 for the application of comprehensive plan and zoning designations. So currently the designation's industrial in the comprehensive plan with Marion County UT 20 industrial urban transition, 20 acres industrial zoning, and the applicant proposed commercial comprehensive plan and general commercial zoning for 1.8 acres in the northwest corner and multifamily and RM2 zoning for the rest of the property. So the Planning Commission has the opportunity to review the proposed designations and can decide whether to forward the applicant's recommendation or staff's recommendation or other zone and comprehensive plan designations to council. So that's the only part that we're working on tonight. And then when council gets the recommendation, they will also be addressing the annexation criteria for their public hearing. We have not scheduled that public hearing at this point, but we anticipate doing that in the near future. And we will move on. So the subject property is outlined here in black, and this would be presented to City Council for approval later this year. I will need to tell you that I am retiring July 15th, so I will not be doing the annexation public hearing. Our coworker Liz Olmstead is going to be taking those cases after I'm no longer with the city, and she's working with me on several right now to prepare for that. So in this map, the red dashed line is the city limits, and Hazel Green Road to the north is designated as a parkway in the Salem Transportation Systems Plan. 49th Avenue Northeast over to the east is a collector. And further south off of the map is Kale Road. Lunar Street dead ends into the subject property, and it is a local street, as are the other streets in the area. The property currently contains single-family dwelling and some accessory buildings. The nearby properties on the north side of Hazel Green are mostly single-family and agricultural uses. To the west, we have the undeveloped city park that was recently annexed. To the east is a recently approved self-service storage development, and to the south is North Star subdivision. As we mentioned before, the subject property is industrial in the comprehensive plan, and surrounding properties to the west are parks, open space, and outdoor recreation. To the south and east, single family residential, except for the self-service storage, which is also industrial. And then north of Hazel Green, those properties are developing residential. Marion County UT 20 zoning is here shown in a light brown, and the other properties north of Hazel Green are urban transition 5-acre zoning. So property to the south and also in the North Star subdivision is single family residential, and the park was zoned public amusement when it was annexed. So this map shows the different area that's proposed in the northwest corner for commercial designation and the remainder for multifamily. And in the zone change, the CG, it's a little hard to read there, it's in a gray. So CG for that 1 acres and RM2 for the remainder. We just received a few comments. Northgate Neighborhood Association indicated they support and had a few concerns about traffic mitigation on Hazel Green Road, northeast, primarily ingress and egress, access for commercial property to the southerly properties, and the amount of green space that would be between residential and commercial. So with the future development, there would be an urban growth area preliminary declaration that would address the linking and boundary facilities, including the streets, that would be required to serve the subject property. And the applicant submitted a TPR, transportation planning rule analysis, that demonstrates the proposal won't have a significant impact on the system as defined under the Oregon administrative rules. And our assistant city traffic engineer recommended a condition for a trip cap to 2,992 average daily vehicle trips. So with further development, a traffic impact analysis may be required, and that would evaluate offsite impacts, ensure that the facilities are available to accommodate the traffic impacts. Similarly, we did receive one comment from a citizen nearby in the North Star development who mentioned the traffic and requested that we have no parking signs on Lunar Street Northeast, but that's not something that we would recommend because this application can't be responsible for putting no parking signs on another development. With the green space issue that was raised, the future residential and commercial development, if that occurs according to the applicant's request, would be subject to the development standards applicable when those applications are submitted. This property is not subject to homeowners association. We received one very brief email from Oregon Department of Transportation that said they really didn't have any comments at this point regarding the zone change or comprehensive plan change, but they indicated that the applicant's engineer has reached out to them and started preliminary discussions about scoping for the traffic study. And they acknowledged that the development's expected to increase trips through the Highway 99 East and Hazel Green intersection. So ODOT's planning to send traffic comments to the city and Marion County as they receive them. Our Public Works Department Development Services Division, as I mentioned, indicated that the proposed development wouldn't have a significant impact on the system as long as that trip cap condition is applied. The UGA would be required, and the site-specific infrastructure requirements would be addressed later at site plan review. Fire department had no concerns, indicated, as they usually do, that their access and water supply requirements would be evaluated at the time of development. Building and safety had no comments. So staff found that the proposed request for multifamily and RM2 met all the criteria, but we didn't find that the commercial and general commercial designations met all the criteria. We found that multifamily would be a logical extension of the nearby residential area, where an isolated area of general commercial zoning would not be. We found that the residential development multifamily designations would be compatible with nearby development, where the possible uses in CG zone, which include, for example, car dealerships or general wholesaling, are a little too high intensity for this area and wouldn't be compatible with the predominantly residential development. And we found that for criterion 3, the multifamily designations would address the multifamily deficit that we've identified in the housing needs analysis, and also is consistent with our Salem recommendation for multifamily for this property, whereas the commercial designations wouldn't be consistent with our Salem and would reduce the area slightly that would be available for multifamily development. For criterion 4, we found that commercial designations do serve the public interest for the surrounding area, but sorry, I just messed that up. Okay. So the criterion 4, I need to rearrange my screen. It's kind of not visible there. So commercial designations do serve the public interest for the immediate surrounding area, because they would provide some services within walking distance for that future multifamily development and would reduce vehicle miles that could be traveled from other developments. But the multifamily designations serve the higher priority needs of the general public. Therefore, our recommendation was to deny the commercial designation and apply the multifamily comprehensive plan designation to the entire territory, and to deny the CG general commercial zoning for that northwest area, and instead to apply the RM2 zoning for the entire territory upon annexation, contingent on approval of the comprehensive plan map designation, of course, and subject to the condition for the trip cap for 2,992 average daily vehicle trips. So after Planning Commission receives testimony from the applicant and other parties, you may make a recommendation to City Council whether to adopt the applicant's proposal, staff's recommended designations, or different designations, and that would be forwarded to City Council for the annexation public hearing. And Council even has the authority at that point to adopt, modify, or reject the Planning Commission's recommendation. So that concludes my presentation. I'm available for answering questions.
Thank you. I have Commissioner Slater, followed by Commissioner Akes.
Thank you. I have a couple questions. First of all, what is the designation for? Is it Hazelton Road? What's the name of the main road that goes there?
Hazel Green's a Parkway,
Hazel
which
Green,
is pretty high intensity. That's one of the highest that we have short of the freeways. So Parkway is a higher level of use than major arterials such as Lancaster.
But a parkway is designed to facilitate pedestrian activity?
through movements of large volumes of traffic, I'm sure that we would have some pedestrian facilities required as well.
Okay.
And that would be according to the street requirements that are in the transportation systems plan.
Okay. So maybe not tonight if we keep the hearing open, but I would be interested in seeing a cross section of what the Parkway is and what the pedestrian or bike facilities associated with the standard Parkway is. So that would be my question.
And that would not be applied at annexation or with the comprehensive plan change. Again, that would happen with the urban growth area preliminary declaration and the development plans in the future.
Yes, and I understand, but I think understanding how the pedestrian and transportation facilities relate to the project, I think is important in understanding the general commercial or other opportunities there for commercial activity. So that's what my question is. What standard will it be developed to? I think that will relate to what the ultimate zoning for that proposed commercial area might be. If I have a second question, if I may.
Sure.
Could you show us on the map where the self-storage facility will be? I was a little unclear.
Just one moment, let me get
Sure,
that back.
thank you.
It's in this area. So it's located between the subject.
We can't see your
We
screen.
can't see. your
Sorry,
screen.
okay, just a moment.
Was it the
Avenue?
narrow strip on the right-hand side?
Yes, it's east.
Okay, and that has already been approved?
That was approved in the county. That was not a city application.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you. That answers my question.
Okay, Commissioner Ika, so you have your hand raised.
Thank you. I have a whole series of questions I want to explore here, particularly relating to how much commercial development there is around there and how much access, if this property was developed and it's multifamily residential with, maybe close to 3,000 average daily vehicle trips. I assume it's a fairly sizable development. What access do these people have to commercial services? I'm unclear as to how close commercial services are to this area.
The nearest that we have are at the intersection of Hazel Green and Portland Road, and there are some that are further southwest from Hazel Green on Portland Road. And when I looked at those, they weren't typical neighborhood type services. They were higher intensity services like looks like some kind of a warehousing, distribution, and other uses.
So basically there is a lack of access. If this is developed, those residents do not have any neighborhood type services very close by. Would that be correct to say?
Right.
And as I understand what you're saying is that even though that's the case, the need for multifamily housing trumps the desire to have some commercial space available for those services. Is that correct?
At this time, yes, the applicant is welcome to make other proposals, and our staff recommendation primarily was not in favor of the commercial general designation, but if they propose a lower intensity commercial use that would primarily serve the neighborhood, then we would entertain
so
that.
That's getting to where I'm getting here, because I've been reading the stuff about the neighborhood hubs, and just a moment, I thought I had. I had a file here that had the notes on it. Oh, the from our Salem, neighborhood hub creation of it is to support and facilitate improved local access to daily goods and services, enhance neighborhood resiliency, and foster complete neighborhoods. E34, new neighborhoods. New large subdivisions and planned unit developments should be allowed and encouraged to incorporate neighborhood hubs to promote the creation of complete neighborhoods. From land use and urbanization summary. Neighborhoods will be well connected to surrounding areas, including nature, and they will feature neighborhood hubs that provide residents with safe, easy access to goods and services. So what I'm wondering is, and I see this, I know the neighborhood started mostly in, neighborhood hubs concept came mostly in existing residential developments that did not have. So I have two questions. One is, are we abandoning the idea of neighborhood hubs in multifamily housing areas?
No.
Then would, given the lack of commercial services close by for this, and given the size, and I'm speculating on the relative size, given the size, would it be more acceptable to have this as a neighborhood hub than as a commercial? Because I know that does narrow down the services that are allowed, and that's probably a good thing. But it seems that if we're not going to designate it commercial, that it would still seem like an area like this would be appropriate for a neighborhood hub.
Yes, I think that's a reasonable point. And I
that
believe that the applicant will make that point for you.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Slater.
Thank you. Could we just see, is it possible to see a map with a more zoomed out perspective so I can see where 99 and other roads in Portland Road you mentioned come in?
Sure.
I'm not that familiar with Hazel Green Road.
Yes, I need to close this and get to that. Just one moment.
Thank you.
It's very close to Easy Orchards. We haven't been there.
Aha. Well, they have wonderful donuts.
They do. Yes, they do.
Ice cream is pretty good too, I think.
Yeah.
I haven't tried the ice cream.
Would you like to see comp plan or the zoning?
Whatever is convenient for you.
Okay, either one. All right. So city and county, I'll show. Okay, let me get that shared. All right, so are you able to see that? So
Yeah.
UT 20 industrial is the location of the subject property. There's a small area of general commercial right at the intersection that's
Gotcha.
in the county. And then there's some CG general commercial and industrial commercial closer to Kale and Portland Road.
Got ya. Okay, that's very helpful. Thank you.
All right.
So Pam, you mentioned that the applicant would speak to the neighborhood hub possibility. Was
Possibly,
that,
yes.
Possibly. That wasn't something that was pursued during the formation of your Lisa AO.
Hi there, Lisa Anderson will be for the record. So neighborhood hubs is not a zone that exists today. So you can't make a recommendation to apply neighborhood hub unless the applicant wants to hold off going to city council for their annexation until after our Salem is adopted. So if you didn't tune in last week, the council's continued the hearing to July 11th. Potentially they would deliberate that night, and then there would need to be second reading on the ordinance, and then it's 30 days before it's effective. So it's going to be at least a few more months before neighborhood hub is a zone that we have in the city that we can apply
But isn't it
properties.
true, though, that we've got designations for possible neighborhood hubs throughout Salem? Is this area
It's
inconsistent?
all in our Salem, and the actual zone itself is being created in our Salem. It's not
Right.
a zone that exists today.
Okay.
So again, if the annexation is slowed down
Mhm.
and not taken to council until after our Salem is through the appeal period, then neighborhood hub zone could be applied to that through that process. The applicant could also, if they want to pursue a neighborhood hub, ask for it to be a part of it to be rezoned. You know, if they want to go through their annexation now and not wait.
Mhm.
Or the commission could consider some other, like a mixed use zone that we have today, a mixed use 1 or mixed use 2. I mean, or obviously you can consider, you know, commercial general, which is what the applicant's asking for.
Mhm.
Commercial office, and then we have other zones, but neighborhood hub doesn't exist today. So if if the applicant is saying, no, we want neighborhood hub, then the commission could recommend that, but then we would put the application on hold until our Salem is adopted.
What current zone do we have that's most compatible with the concept that they want, but not commercial general? And it's more compatible with neighborhood hub, even though we don't have that yet.
I don't think we have a zone that's compatible with a neighborhood hub, which is why we're creating it. I'm not sure that I can speak to what the applicant's looking for at the moment.
Okay.
If they might have changed their mind from the CG, or if they maybe would describe more what kind of uses they want, then I think maybe we can answer that after
Okay.
we hear from the applicant.
That sounds great. Commissioner Slater, you had a question.
Yeah, thank you. I think we're all zooming in on the same issue area here. So Lisa, it sounds like at least mixed use 1 and 2 are zoning options that are available today,
Yes,
but not mixed use 3.
correct.
Okay,
And we
thank
would,
you.
for the same reason we're not recommending CG, we wouldn't recommend mixed use 3 because
And
of
that
the
is
same
because of the more
uses.
intensive usage like auto dealerships and, is that right?
Exactly.
Gotcha.
Yes.
Perfect. Thank
Like
you very
South
much.
Commercial with that area. Commissioner Ekus.
Lisa, if I understand what you're saying, is one option, and there are maybe other options, but is one option that we proceed with this, and then at a later date with the staff recommendation, but at a later date, if the applicant wishes, they could come in and apply for a neighborhood hub in this same spot, in the same area that they've got designated now as a commercial in their application.
Well, our recommendation would be if they wanted, our recommendation is that the whole thing be multifamily, or that we pick a zone that's not commercial general. That's staff's recommendation. So for
Right,
example,
but
if the
we
planning
can't
commission
pick
wanted to say, you can't pick neighborhood hub today unless the applicant's saying that they want to put a kind of a hold on their application and wait for that to be a viable zone.
Well-
But I'm just saying, if the commission were to recommend the whole thing be multifamily, there's nothing that would prohibit the applicant from submitting a separate application once they're annexed to say,
Okay.
well, we want this portion, to be a neighborhood hub. There are like locational requirements for creating a neighborhood hub, but I'm pretty sure this would qualify. So.
Okay, so I think the answer to my question was yes, that's one option, is they could,
Mhm.
we could proceed with this, and then the applicant could come in later for a neighborhood hub.
That sounds.
Frankly, not my preferred option. I'd like to know that there's a space
Yeah.
there to start with, but that's an option. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions for Pam? We'll move to the applicant. And as a reminder, please state your name and address for the record, and you have 15 minutes from 6:08. Welcome.
Welcome. Good evening. My name is Zach Bells. I'm a land use planner with AKS Engineering and Forestry. We are located at 3700 River Road in Kaiser, Oregon. And let me just get to my presentation here. I'll share that with you. And we'll get going. So can you give me a quick thumbs up to make sure you can hear me and see my presentation, full screen of it? Thank you very much. I'm going to go through this really quickly. Thanks for your time. Pamela did a good job of covering most of it. Like I mentioned, I'm Zach Bells. I'm with AKS Engineering and Forestry. I'm joined tonight by Jeff Bivens, who's representing the applicant, who is I&E Construction, and Joseph Schaefer with Jordan Ramus. We're hopeful that we can answer any questions that you have by the close of our presentation. I want to quickly talk a little bit about some of the background that led us to where we're at today, because I think it's relevant to the conversation. We want to make a few responses to the staff's findings, in particular to the objection to our CG zoning request. We're going to walk through how we see our project complies with the applicable criteria in the matter of this decision, and then hopefully have some time to walk through any questions that you have. Your staff talked about kind of where the site's located relative to the existing city limits and the urban growth boundary. We won't rehash that. So I guess I'll just start by saying that by way of some background, this is the third time that this application has been revised since it was originally submitted, all the way back in September of 2020. And the first iteration included, I guess, an assemblage of land use designations that would have allowed or would have accommodated single family residential uses. By about June of that following year, and after conversations with city staff, the applicant decided to change the development plan to one that accommodated multifamily. And that was after conversations with staff about the work that staff was doing with the Our Salem project, and at the encouragement of staff to put forth a development application that was more in line with the city's need to promote multifamily housing. AKS became involved in the project in August of 2021, and after conversations with staff and the applicant decided to make some tweaks to that application. So we were still thinking multifamily and commercial would be kind of laid out on the site, but we wanted to be more explicit and deliberate about the specific zoning that we're going to accommodate that. And so that's why we have this mix of zoning designations to accommodate those future mixed uses on the site. And so that's the evolution. But the key point really is that all the way back in August 2021, we met with staff and went through the proposal that you're looking at today. And we appreciate that staff made no promises to us at that time, but staff did indicate strong support for what we are working on and what you see in front of you today. And from then to the point when we submitted our application, all the way up until just last week when we got the staff report, there was no indication from staff at any point along the way that they weren't supportive of what we were doing. We checked in several times, and there was never any word from staff about their hesitation towards our approach. It was only last week when we got the staff report that we saw that staff was recommending denial of the 1.8 acre CG zone portion of the site. The other point that I want to make is that when we were talking with staff early on, we understood that the work of Our Salem would not override pending land use applications. We met with staff way early on, and it became clear to us and gave us some confidence in moving forward that regardless of what the Planning Commission was working on and would ultimately adopt as part of Our Salem, that wouldn't undo the time and effort that we spent working on this application. That was an important thing for us and our client, as there's just a lot of time and money that gets put into this type of work. And so that's partly what's happening here, is that part of staff's justification for their objection to our commercial piece, at least, is that the recommendation from Our Salem is a site that's entirely multifamily. And again, we think that that is inconsistent with kind of the advice we've been given before. Here's a quick timeline again. The application was originally submitted in 2020, last revised in 2022. The Planning Commission didn't make their recommendation on Our Salem until April of 2022. So well after our application was submitted. We'll talk a little bit later, but the point really is that our application should be tested against the zoning that's in place today. So this next series of slides are just basically our rebuttal arguments to those staff rationale for objection to our CG zone portion of the site. Before I get into that, though, I will say we agree with what staff is saying for about 88%, and that's just because 88% of our site is zoned and requested to be zoned for RM2. We agree with that. We think the justification for that is sound and supported by the code, but we also think that the justification for CG on that small portion of the site is just as sound, and we're going to walk through that here. So Pamela did a good job of laying out why the city disagrees with CG zoning on that portion of the site. And what you're looking at here is our site and the proposal in our Salem to change the comp plan designation to multifamilies. You can see it's the entire site. Staff's justification, the first justification for opposition to CG is because it's isolated from other commercial areas like we talked about before. You can see here, this is that area of isolation that staff's talking about. You know, we're looking at this more, again, that neighborhood hub concept isn't adopted yet. Certain mixed use zones are not adopted yet. We're looking at this site as kind of a mixed use project through the use of the existing zoning designations that are currently available to us. So in response to that first criterion as to whether or not it represents a logical urbanization of the site, we think it's logical because it promotes efficient development. And your staff concurs with that. This is just kind of an excerpt of the staff report from our Salem. And it talks about, you know, all the benefits of mixed use, the benefits as far as land use efficiency is concerned, and that's in the staff's findings to goal 14. And energy conservation. It really provides a good ability for people to walk and bike to everyday shopping needs, get groceries, where they would otherwise have to drive for those short trips. And so there's a lot of efficiency benefits with that. Another benefit of our kind of mix of individual zoning districts is that it confines the commercial uses to the Hazel Green Road corridor, which, like your staff pointed out, is identified to be a parkway in the future, the city's kind of highest designation, highest functional classification roadway. And so that kind of helps create a buffer between that portion of the site and other residential portions that are more interior to the site. And finally, the application just responds really to the need for multifamily and commercial land in the city. This slide here is just showing a comparison between the surplus, the significant surplus of industrial land as identified in the latest economic opportunities analysis, compared with the important deficit of both multifamily and commercial land. And again, as I mentioned before, our project does both, but more significantly so in terms of accommodating multifamily residential uses. So the site's about 15.5 acres in total area. 88% of that total area is dedicated for future multifamily uses, and just a small piece of that, about 12% or 1.8 acres would be available for commercial uses. Staff's second argument of disagreement, I guess, with our CG zoning is that it's incompatible with the predominantly residential uses in the surrounding area. I won't go into detail here, but there's really no explicit definition for what that means, what compatibility means. And there's really no detailed analysis in the staff report about why it's incompatible. It just says it is incompatible. We believe that it is very compatible, and we believe there's evidence in our Salem and the city's recent adoption of all the mixed use and expanded mixed use zoning throughout our Salem. Planning Commission's recommendation to the City Council to adopt the recommendations in our Salem, I should say. In that same document shows mixed use zones, in particular mixed use 3, that allows the same, I guess, the same arrangement of commercial and residential uses that are allowed under our plan within one individual zone. And then those zones are located in our Salem next to single family and residential zones. And so all those things taken together indicate that the city believes themselves that, and the city has, I guess, established that those uses can coexist in harmony with one another. And I want to quickly go through this table to just kind of show what we mean by those uses being compatible. So again, here's a comparison between the uses that are planned to be allowed outright in MU3 relative to the uses that are allowed outright in RM2 and CG. And what this just shows is that those household residential type uses between MU3 and RM2 are similar, very much the same. And likewise, those allowed commercial uses between MU3 and CG are very much the same. And again, so if all of those same commercial and residential uses are all permitted outright in the MU3 zone, you can only conclude that those uses must be compatible with each other, right? Like, so if the city is going to have an MU3 zone and allow all these uses in that zone, they certainly must be compatible with each other. On top of that, the city is, through our Salem, at least the Planning Commission on April 19th, recommended to locate these MU3 zones next to many areas that are zoned for single family and multifamily use. And this next series of slides is just going to show that. So here's an area along Portland Road near the I-5 interchange where the city is recommending the location of MU3, again, in proximity to single family zoned areas. Further south on Portland Road near Silverton Road. Here's Silverton Road, west of I-5, kind of same configuration next to single family zoned areas. Lancaster, Sunnyview. So you get the point. And again, this is just to show that by virtue of recommending adoption of this, we believe that the city has already indicated support for the idea that these uses are compatible with each other. I think the last point we want to make with regard to compatibility is that the neighborhood supports this. The neighborhood submitted an email to the record to say that they're in support of it, as your staff pointed out, with a few concerns that that are easily accommodated. And we believe that this letter of support is a strong indication. It's not every day that we get letters of support from neighborhoods for our applications. And so we also believe that that's a good indication that there's support for it. So the staff's third point in opposition is that there's simply a greater need for multifamily housing relative to commercial uses, and we agree with that. Like I said, we've set up our applications so that the vast majority of the site is set aside for multifamily uses, but we really think, and as you were discussing before, there's important benefits to co-locating commercial and multifamily uses together. There's energy efficiency benefits, there's land use efficiency benefits, neighborhood, just the attractiveness of neighborhoods and the desire for people to live there increases when there are services nearby to walk to.
Zach, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you. So finally, just your staff read through the decision criteria at the beginning of the meeting. I won't go into these, only to point out that in this third criterion, if you can see my mouse here, it says that the test before you today is whether or not our proposal is equally or better suited to the property than the existing zone, which if brought in to the city would be IG or an industrial zone. And this is just a comparison to show those uses that would be allowed under the IG zone relative to what we're proposing today, which again is that test. Its proposal is equally or better suited than the existing zone. The existing zone would emphasize warehousing, distribution types uses, manufacturing uses that are more impactful to those surrounding residential uses. What we're putting forth emphasizes housing, offices, retail uses, things that we've mentioned before can be much more compatible with what's out there today, and that addresses that need for multifamily and commercial land. So relative to that test, we absolutely think it's equally or better suited than what's there today. So we recommend that you approve the application that's in front of you today. Again, we think it's consistent with the relevant approval criteria, that it fulfills an important need for housing, jobs, convenient access to shopping, and it's just absolutely consistent with the objectives of our Salem. And with that, we're happy to answer any questions. Like I said, we've got our team on board. We're happy to discuss with you kind of other options as we go forward. And thanks very much for your time.
Thank you, Zach. We have Commissioner Slater with his hand raised, followed by
Thank you.
Commissioner Ekus.
Thank you, Mr. Pelt. So, I mean, I find that most of your comments are fairly persuasive. And I certainly agree that actually dotting commercial around areas rather than linking them all together is probably in the long run where we want to wind up going. But my question for you is whether or not your clients are, well, let me back up and say that my concern with general commercial, and I think I was picking up this a little bit on staff, is that some of the uses in general commercial are less compatible with residential neighborhoods or multifamily in a park nearby than some other parts of general commercial. So then I would point out, for example, a car dealership or a diesel maintenance station, right? I think so. My concern is more with the broad possibilities of what could land on that site in general commercial than just whether or not that those are retail oriented facilities. So does your client have any sort of flexibility or willingness to consider something like an RM1 zone in that area?
So thank you, Commissioner Slater. We haven't really had an opportunity to talk through this in much detail. I will say that we don't have specific uses completely figured out at this point, and they're still very subject to change. I believe applicant would be willing to entertain retail commercial, a retail commercial zone or something similar to that, or something that allows a similar type of uses. But I would appreciate the opportunity if we could take a break to kind of talk through that before we commit to any modification, I guess, to our proposal.
Sure, of course. I have one more question, if I may.
Yes, you may.
So one of the reasons that many of us are interested in promoting the mixed use zones is that it brings the buildings forward to the front without that kind of parking space, and it's a more pedestrian friendly. You don't have the situation now where we have kind of strip malls between the road and the sidewalk and pedestrian and biking facilities with a big car parking lot in between. So one of the advantages of the mixed use zone is that it brings those buildings in that and creates, a front to the street. Is there any, I'm sure this is a little bit ahead of it, but have you thought a little bit about what the design issues are for the space?
We have not considered that.
Fair answer. Thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Ekus, you have a question?
Yeah. It seems one of the concerns is the broader scope of the of what's allowed under commercial. And I understand your position about operating under existing zones as opposed to what might happen in the future. But I'm wondering, and you've heard our discussion about neighborhood hubs. I'm wondering if you've looked at the neighborhood hubs concept at all, and if the types of retail that you envision in your commercial application could fit under the neighborhood hub, or whether you see the neighborhood hub as a option for commercial services there as opposed to what you're looking at currently.
So thank you for that question. I am not, to be honest, very familiar with what would be allowed under neighborhood hubs, and I need to take a look at that. I guess probably most importantly right now is just the timeline, the fact that isn't going to be adopted for at least 3 months, and
yeah,
so I think that'd be our biggest concern.
Did you have a follow-up, Commissioner Ekus?
No, I do have some questions after this for staff and the attorney, perhaps.
Okay, we'll get to them in just a few minutes. Any more questions of the applicant? It's a very thorough presentation, Zach. You did a good job.
Thank you.
We don't have anybody from the neighborhood association, although we did note your comment about their support, and nobody has signed up to testify. So we're at the point for questions of staff from the commissioners. Commissioner Ekus, did you want to start us off?
Well, thank you.
Excuse me a moment, if I could interject. Joseph Schaefer, paralegal and land use specialist.
Yeah, you've already had your 15 minutes for applicants, unless you're responding to a question.
Yes, and that's exactly what I would like to do.
Whose question are you responding to?
Commissioner Slater's and the neighborhood associations comment on some questions about Hazel Green.
Okay.
And I understood we'd have 5 minutes for rebuttal, so that's.
Yeah, that's coming up. It's not quite there yet.
Oh, okay.
Would you like to save that for your rebuttal?
Sure.
Okay, because we're going to do questions of staff first.
Okay.
And then you get a chance to kind of come back and clarify from your end, if that
Thank
works
you.
for you. Okay, I won't forget you.
Okay.
Commissioner Slater question. Oh, Commissioner Egas, you're on for questions of staff, and then we'll go to Slater.
Well, the applicants raised the issue of current designation of zones versus future designation of zones. And as I understand it, staff position is based on commercial and just deciding that it's not in this particular case, in this particular property, not appropriate. But I'd like staff to address the degree to which we, the legal issue that was raised of whether or not, to the degree to which proposed zone changes can be taken into account.
Lisa, do you want that?
And I'm not sure I understood the question, the degree to which proposed zone changes can be taken into account.
Well, the applicant has said that they base their application on current zones, and that's what we should consider, and we should not consider.
Yes, I agree. That's why I was saying, unless the applicant's asking for neighborhood hubs and is asking for a delay until that's a viable zone, then the commission cannot recommend a neighborhood hub. But I see Tom popped on, so.
Tom.
Well, I was Tom Capani, Deputy City Attorney. I was just going to reiterate what Lisa said, that, you know, our Salem isn't law yet. It's a recommendation from the Planning Commission. The City Council hasn't acted on it yet, and so it doesn't have any force of law. And so the criteria that are in place now are the criteria by which you should judge this application.
So if I could follow up, then I'm just trying to understand. I'm not in an argument here. I'm just trying to understand where we are in the decision. So we're really looking at whether or not we think that the staff's determination that the CG designation is not logical for this particular development.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Slater.
Thank you. Two questions. The first one is went right out of my head. So let me ask the second one while I think about the first one. So the second question, and I know this is getting a little bit ahead of ourselves, but the city has a criteria on connectivity when we have a new development. So, for example, I don't remember the street that dead ends in this property, but would that then be required to extend through to Hazel Green?
Yes.
Okay. So we're not going to, by incorporating this, we're not dead ending that street. We're going to actually facilitate. Okay. And I did remember my second question. I delayed long enough. So I don't know if it's possible, Lisa, but can you walk us through the differences between RM1 and I said RM1, mixed use 1 and general commercial? I know that's kind of like a pop quiz, which is unfair, but
geez, Lise. Well, for example, so first of all, mixed use 1 allows housing outright as a permitted use, and it allows all retail and office uses. But what it doesn't allow is car related uses. So you're not going to get a gas station. Prohibits drive-throughs no matter what the use is. So you know, even though you could have a bank, you can't have a drive-through bank. Even though you can have a restaurant, you can't have a drive-through restaurant.
Gotcha.
It doesn't allow things like auto sales, auto repair. So it's really limiting the auto-oriented uses. It also has design standards. So the CR doesn't have any design standards. You know, we have setbacks, we have height, lot coverage, that kind of stuff in every zone. But the mixed use zone 1 and 2 both have pretty urban level kind of design standards. The building needs to be up to the street. If you have parking, it's behind. There has to be a certain level of the ground floor. There has to be windows. There has to be awnings, that kind of thing. So we don't have that in the CR zone or the CG zone.
Okay.
I do want to
And-
speak maybe to the MU3 if that's okay, because there was a lot of kind of discussion. The MU3 was created for existing areas that are already kind of auto oriented along our main streets, that where we wanted to be sure to allow housing as a use outright. And we wanted to kind of slowly nudge them into more of a pedestrian oriented design, so that new development, while it will allow a drive-through, for example, the drive-through would be on the rear of the building. It doesn't prohibit gas stations, et cetera. It just kind of affects the design of them. So it was not our intention. It would not be our recommendation that on a brand new site that's not developed for commercial uses, we would not recommend MU3 in that case. So we would recommend more of a mixed use zone if what we're trying to do is get services near housing.
You have a follow-up, Commissioner Slater?
I don't, strangely enough.
Okay.
I'm good.
Other questions of staff? We'll have one more opportunity after the rebuttal, but
If I could jump in, there was a question previously about the cross section for the Parkway. So I have that. I can pull that up real quick.
that'd be great.
While Pamela's doing that, I will note that the North Star development just to the east of here didn't build to a full parkway. So even though that's the standard, I'm pretty sure the requirement was to build to a minor arterial. So they might have dedicated the right of way, but they didn't fully build their half of a parkway, which is often done when it's like, this might be the really long-term plan, but it's not proportional necessarily to what the development is generating, or the city has more of a less long-term interim plan. So I'm pretty sure if you scroll down, Pamela, can you scroll down on that page and show the minor arterial section? I'm pretty sure that they just built to the minor arterial standard. So it's unlikely, unless Pamela knows different, that they would have to do a full parkway frontage improvement when they come in for the apartments. But either way, it would include street trees, sidewalks, bike lane on the street.
Public Works did note that the right-of-way dedication would be 60 feet from center line, which is the Parkway standard. So
Yeah.
even though they may not have to build to full standards at this time, they would have the right-of-way dedication or a special setback at least.
Commissioner Slater has a question for you, Pam.
So just to follow up, so regardless if this turns into a parkway or if it's built, in the immediate instance as a minor arterial, we are going to have street trees, and then between the road and the street tree, well, the street tree is going to be in between the road and the sidewalk in both cases. Is that right?
That's correct. Yes.
Okay. So I
Sidewalk,
would label that pretty pedestrian friendly. So thank you.
All right.
Thank you, Pam.
I will also, I'm sorry if I could, Commissioner Griggs, I apologize. Sometimes in a comp plan zone change, the Planning Commission will recommend the zone, but maybe limit certain uses as not being permitted. So I don't know if maybe that's something you would want to consider. I think I heard the applicant say that maybe CR zone would be okay, and obviously they have rebuttal, or the hearing might be continued. But that might be something to consider if a CR zone is maybe preferable to the Planning Commission or even the CG. Maybe there could be some agreement on a list of uses that wouldn't be permitted on that site to kind of limit the impact. So
to make it align more with the MU1.
Potentially, yes.
Potentially. Okay. Any more questions of staff at this time? Not seeing any. We'll go to you, Mr. Schaefer. You wanted to participate in the rebuttal, and you've got not a lot of time, 5 minutes.
Yeah, and first I'm going to say that Pamela Coles just stole my thunder, because I was going to bring up this same page from the TSP to show to everyone the question that Commissioner Slater asked. The other question that came up was in the comments from the Hazel Green Neighborhood Association. Not sure if that's the right name, but the Neighborhood Association about access to Hazel Green. So it was discussed that Lunar Street is going to come all the way through the property up there, and that'll be a public street intersection. Maybe Pamela or Lisa could tell you, but personally, I would be shocked if the city allows access to a commercial site other than directly to Hazel Green. My assumption is going to be that the access will, both to the commercial and the multifamily, will all be through a public street driveway only. And Zach or Jeff can kick me under the virtual table if I'm wrong, but I'm presuming that all the access onto Hazel Green will be from that public street.
As far as I know, yes, because there would be the public street going through, and because Hazel Green's
Yeah.
such a high priority in the TSP as a parkway, driveways will be coming from a local street in this situation because it's not designated as a collector. So local
Okay.
street there, and driveway approach permits, of course.
And then one other comment to Commissioner Slater, if again referring to the North Star single family project a little to the east, one thing that's being done there that doesn't show up on these cross sections is stormwater swales. And so I'm not sure how that'll fit into the final design, but that's something to keep in mind that you're likely to see to capture stormwater from the public right of way. Okay, and then I see Commissioner Slater has a question. I'd be happy to answer that. And then I think I would like to follow up on Zach's request and see if we could take 5 minutes amongst ourselves.
Commissioner Slater, why don't we go to you? Lisa, will you want to text me?
Sure. Very quickly, just so when you talk about the public street that will be installed, you're talking about the extension of Lunar, whatever it eventually is called. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. That was it.
Yeah. Okay. Can we have a few minutes? Mine probably won't take 5.
Oh, Lisa, I'm fine with that if that's okay with staff. I'm not sure if that's
Yeah, that's fine to do.
okay. We'll be
Okay.
back. We'll see you in about 5 minutes.
Yeah, thanks.
You bet.
Are we in recess? Is that our official status? I
Yes.
think Ian has his hand up too.
I was assuming we were recessed, but I can, Commissioner Levin, did you have your question?
I was going to ask if this was a formal recess or if we needed to fill this time with questions, because I have stuff percolating in my head on this. So I could ask staff some questions, or if we want to do a formal recess.
I think it's a formal recess because I want the applicant to be able to hear what you're saying.
Got it. Okay.
I'm going to go get more water. I'll be back by 6:46.
Okay, we're ready. Having requested 5, we used a little less, and so maybe we'll just wait till folks circle back from.
Okay, let me see if I've got all I think I have everybody that. Lisa, are you back? And Tom?
I'm here.
Okay, great. So we have a little bit of time left on your rebuttal. Would you like to use that now?
Yeah, and I see a question from Commissioner Levin. I'm not sure if that's for me or someone else.
Is that a question for staff, Commissioner Levin, or? Okay, so we'll after we hear your rebuttal.
Okay.
It's for staff. Yeah.
Okay.
But
I just want to make sure Jeff and Zach are back on. Okay, thank you. I just want to take a moment and explain the background of why we went for general commercial, because it is the broadest category. And at this point in the project, we don't have a potential user signed up. And so we want to cast our net as widely as possible. Several of the uses of concern to the city are impractical for this site at 1.8 acres. So we weren't concerned about those. That said, we understand how it can be of concern to the folks to see something like a warehouse on the list of approved uses, even if the site is only 1.8 acres. So a roundabout way of saying we're happy if the Planning Commission would like to recommend a retail commercial zone instead. Our intent is to have a local commercial node. People can get a coffee, people can get lunch. Certainly, we have lots of residents coming. There was some question raised earlier about how many apartments, and we haven't done the math yet, but it's probably north of 300. I'm not particularly familiar with the zone, the RM2 zone, but ballpark 300, 350 is roughly the scale that we're looking at. And then of course we have our new North Star subdivision and North Place apartments, for which this will be, not as convenient, but certainly convenient for that.
Okay. Questions for Mr. Schaefer on his rebuttal? I had, so interpreting your comments, it sounds like maybe amenable to the mixed use 1, which is ruling out the auto uses, drive ups.
We would prefer the retail commercial because one of our most likely users is coffee. And this Parkway design, as was described earlier, is to carry the maximum amount of traffic. And so we think it's appropriate to be able to serve some of those folks, given that we'll have the nice pedestrian facilities and bike facilities that you saw on the cross sections. We would like to preserve that opportunity for the drive-throughs.
Okay. Any other questions of Mr. Schaefer at this point? Questions of staff, going back to Staff Commissioner Levin, I believe you had a question.
Yes, I do. Thank you. The question is about the connectivity, the future road, what is that? Lunar, going north and connecting to Hazel Green. Would the property zoned, that's proposed to be zoned commercial general, would that access off of that Lunar Street, or would it have its own driveway off of? That's what I'm trying to understand on that one.
Yeah, sorry, Pam was going to say it. We wouldn't allow a driveway off the Parkway, so it would need to come off of a new internal street.
Okay, so the same applies as the other lot zone proposed to be RM2.
Right.
So the other question, I have one other follow-up question related to the prohibition of drive-throughs. I think the last couple of years has proven that there's a viable use for drive-throughs and that they don't always just apply to the traditional model of the fast food chain. Is the city reviewing its policy on limiting drive-throughs in a variety of zones? And just backstory on this for folks, drive-throughs had maybe more allowable or was more widely allowed in zones in prior years, and that has changed as the development code has been updated.
Yeah, so the MU1 and MU2 don't allow drive-throughs, and many of our like mixed use overlays that we already had, like Broadway, Edgewater, et cetera, don't really allow drive-throughs, or some of them would allow them only with a conditional use permit. And so we would use that as a way to shape the design so that, there's less kind of impact of the drive-through on the pedestrians. And then MU1 is going to more places through our Salem. So places that maybe today are just CR or are an overlay that maybe would allow it as a conditional use, and they're going to a zone that wouldn't allow a drive-through at all. Again, that MU3 zone is going on most of the land that's, thinking Lancaster and South Commercial that already have more auto-oriented uses, and that does allow a drive-through. The one major change we made earlier this year was the CB zone. So the downtown zone no longer allows drive-throughs, but it did before, which didn't really make a lot of sense when our other, mixed use areas didn't allow them. So, and downtown obviously should be the highest standard for our mixed use. I just want to say our main concern with CG or CR, it's not necessarily a drive-through restaurant, it's a gas station. So the council just denied, a conditional use for a gas station and an apartment complex being built together on Cordon Road. It has been appealed to LUBA, but unanimously denied that. Didn't find it to be compatible at all to put those two uses together on the same site. And so our concern is that, if it would again be a permitted use, if the Planning Commission recommends this to be CG or CR, we would again have this, gas station apartments being built together because we don't believe those uses are compatible.
So then taking that one step further, if we would have our motion include that 1.8 be zoned commercial retail, we could explicitly exclude gas stations in that recommendation.
You could, yes.
So that's one option. I kind of feel like we're having this conversation that probably should be had with staff and the applicant, and not, and during the Planning Commission, but I know that time has been an element for the applicant, and we really this has drawn out for a while. I think that's the only reason I'm feeling comfortable doing this in an open air forum, as opposed to just staff and the applicant. Commissioner Ekus. You're muted, Commissioner Ekus.
This is mostly a question for staff. Is it appropriate at this point?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Well, I guess here's what's troubling me. Is the staff has basically said that we don't think this particular commercial designation, commercial zone, is appropriate. It's not doesn't logically fit. At the same time, it said that it also takes acreage, 1.8 acres away from multifamily housing. Had the discussion about neighborhood hubs where it seems like, as far as usage, appropriate, but and now we have the commercial retail as an option. So I got two questions. One, how does the taking acreage out of the multifamily residence apply to these other designations, but not to the neighborhood hub? That's an argument it seems could be made for all of them. And then what would be the staff's objection to commercial retail other than the gas station?
So yes, our objection is with all the zones, it takes it out of the multifamily acreage. So it's not just neighborhood hubs. We're saying that for all of the zones. I don't know, so you're making a recommendation to council. If council makes changes to the our Salem map and they remove multifamily land and they get to the minimum, then this property will come through for annexation right after that. Then the council will not zone part of this CR, CG, or anything else. They're not going to immediately make another decision to move us below the minimum that we needed to meet state law that we had just adopted, right? Right now, there's a buffer in our Salem, but I believe there's numerous multifamily properties that the council is considering removing from the map. So I won't know until our Salem is adopted where we're at on the acreage. So
Well, here's-
1.8 acres may not matter either way, but I can't answer
Here's
that
here's
today.
my problem. Is because I really believe that a development like this, where people are isolated from normal commercial services, the idea of a small area for commercial services is appealing to me.
I don't disagree.
And
I don't think a gas station is the appropriate commercial
no,
service.
I agree, but it's appealing to me. But at the same time, you know, I'm trying to figure out how I should react to the thought that if I take this 1.8 acres out, I'm reducing the multifamily, and I'm a little worried about that because that starts to trump everything, and we end up with a whole bunch of multifamily developments without the services. And it seems to me the services is a major objective of our Salem plan. So,
And I think I did hear, Commissioner, because I think I did hear Lisa say that if the recommendation was for commercial retail, we could delineate and exclude a gas station.
no, I agree, and maybe even others that we could exclude, but at least the gas station, if that's the major concern from staff. Yes, I heard that, and that's an option to consider.
Zach, I see your hand raised, but we're in the part of the meeting where we just can ask questions of staff, unfortunately. I will ask at a later point if anybody would like the hearing continued or the record left open, if that is something that you were considering. I know the thought of another delay is not high up on your list, but that's why I can't recognize you at this point, Zach. I'm sorry. More questions, additional questions of staff from commissioners? Not seeing any.
I think President Griggs, if the hearing's not going to be continued or closed and the record held open, I think the applicant is required to have another rebuttal.
Okay.
I believe, since there was kind of new information with those questions and
Good point.
answers.
So Mr. Schaefer, do you want to do that, or Zach, Mr. Peltz? Zach, I think you had your hand raised.
Yeah, I think, thanks for recognizing me, Chair Griggs. I guess I just wanted to kind of make a point of order that, we're not really, we're not proposing a specific use, I guess is the point I want to make. We're proposing an entire zoning district at this point. And like Joseph pointed out, we're trying to cast as wide of a net as is necessary to be competitive in the market when the time comes for that. I guess it's just important for all of you to know that I guess this focus now on limitations on gas stations and other similar types of uses seems a little bit premature, I guess, at this point. As far as a continuance, I don't believe we want to request a continuance. Our applicant does not want to request a continuance. I think we're open to leave the record open. I don't know, Joseph, do you have anything you want to add to that?
No, I don't have anything that we would that I would recommend we submit for the record. And I think we've had a great discussion tonight and hashed out a lot of issues. And it's time to get off to the city council.
So you're withdrawing the request to continue to keep the record open, Zach?
Maybe if it's not too much trouble, just give us another minute to confer. This is just kind of a tough format, I guess, to discuss these things internally.
Right.
I'd like to just make sure our client's on board with what we're recommending.
So minute or two?
Sure, that's fine.
We are in another official recess for.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we're ready again. Thank you for the brief
Okay.
recess.
Did you have some decision? on
Yes, so we're not going to request a continuance. We don't need the record left open.
Okay.
We're fine with you entering into deliberations. Again, we feel that the application that we've got in front of you clearly demonstrates compliance with all of the applicable criteria. It is consistent with all of the objectives of our Salem and kind of all the best practices that we've been talking about with mixed use and et cetera. I guess that's really the gist of it. Really, I guess like I mentioned before, time is kind of the essence for us. We've been working at this for a long time. We're really hopeful that we can get moving on this for construction by next year's construction season. And the idea of kind of further delay just is concerning to us in that regard. So again, appreciate your time. I guess I'm open to any last minute questions if you have any, but we'll wait to hear kind of what you deliberate about.
Thank you, Zach.
Thank you.
So since we don't have that request for either of those actions, I will close the hearing and look to Commissioner Levin for a motion and then a second.
For the purpose of deliberation, I will make a motion that we approve the application, case number CPC-ZC 22-03 for property located at 4650 and 4680 Hazel Green Ave Northeast.
With the staff recommendations.
With the staff recommendations.
Okay, do I have a second? And then we'll open it up for a discussion.
Second.
Seconded by Ecos. Got it. Discussion, Commissioner Slater.
So I think that some version of this proposal needs to go forward tonight. And it's pretty clear that there's wide agreement on the multifamily component. So it sounds like we're really zeroing in on the general commercial proposal. I do not support the general commercial proposal based on my concerns about the potential auto use. I respect the applicant's desire to have a wide net, but I don't believe a wide net is appropriate in this particular spot. I would certainly be happy to vote yes for an amendment that would be a mixed use one. And I particularly favor mixed use one over general retail because I like the pedestrian oriented design standards that go along with mixed use one. So that's my thought.
Commissioner Levin.
Thank you. The comment that I would add, I don't have an issue with the CG zone. And from what I've heard from staff and the applicant, I would propose that we amend the application to include the CG zone designation on that 1.8 acre parcel as identified, with a condition that it excludes the section in the CG zone. I want to make sure I read this title correctly. The entire section titled Motor Vehicle, Trailer, and Manufactured Dwelling Sales and Service.
Okay, so we have two potential motions to amend. This is where I'm going to need your help, Lisa. We've got Commissioner Slater's motion to amend.
I didn't make a motion.
Oh, you didn't? Okay, you said you would entertain. Okay, so Commissioner Levin, are you amending?
No, this is topic. This is conversation. I want to hear what the other commissioners had to think.
Commissioner Slater.
Oh, my question was procedural about how we're going to slate the vote, so I can wait till we're done with the conversation.
Okay. I agree with you, Commissioner Levin. I think if you exclude that section of the motor vehicles, I think that's taking the angst away that we don't want in that area. But it does provide for the ability for quite a few options there that would serve that multifamily housing development. So I would be supportive if that motion to amend would go forward on that. Commissioner Ekus.
Thank you. Question on that. Don't have it in front of me, hard to get to. That excludes the motor vehicle. I'm unsure what that leaves us with, because the question is, it's kind of narrowing down what actually fits there and what doesn't fit there. So maybe staff can explain a little bit about what this motion would leave, as opposed to a motion to do commercial retail. If you took that part out, what would be the difference between Commissioner Levin's motion and commercial retail without gas?
I can give that a try. So the commercial general zone, besides housing, it allows nursing care, it allows restaurants, personal services, office uses. It allows every type of motor vehicle use that we have, which includes taxi cabs and services, heavy vehicle sales, storage, gas stations, repair, auto repair.
That's which zone?
This is in the CG zone. So
CG,
if
right.
you were to remove that whole category of auto related, it still allows, for example, it allows recreation and cultural community services and religious services. It allows doctor's offices, daycares, schools, government services. Some of the things that it allows, I'm not sure, funeral and cremation services, military installations, industrial services, cleaning plants, general repair services, general wholesaling, warehousing and distribution. So that can be really auto related, that can be very intense use. It allows general manufacturing on site. If it's limited in scale, it allows printers.
It's pretty vast.
It's a pretty, so CG is a pretty heavy, almost industrial type zone. Commercial retail's not quite as intense. So again, it allows housing only with a conditional use. It does allow like nursing homes, it allows restaurants, it allows offices, it allows some of the auto stuff, so the repairs and gas stations, it allows those. It also allows, again, doctor's offices, schools, government services. It also allows funeral cremation services, military installations, general repair, industrial services. It does not allow wholesaling. It doesn't allow warehousing and distribution. Generally, that's limited. It also allows general manufacturing. It also allows printing. So it can be some intense uses in both of those, I guess.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
That's good clarification. Commissioner Slater.
Thank you. So Lisa, could you just remind us again what is allowable in mixed use one, especially compared to what you just gave us with general retail, general commercial?
Sure. So multifamily is permitted outright. All housing is permitted in that zone generally. And let's see, office, retail, restaurants, those are all permitted. We, again, don't allow any of the auto repair or sales in that zone. We allow churches, we allow doctor's offices, daycares, schools, government offices. We don't allow the funeral and cremation. We don't allow industrial services, cleaning plants. We don't allow any wholesaling. We don't allow any warehousing or distribution. We don't allow any manufacturing unless it's sold on site and less than 5,000 square feet. So kind of like a maker space. There's a lot of no's. Basically, once you get past like office and retail, it basically all turns to no's.
So Lisa, I have a question.
Yes.
Because it sounds like the mixed use one is, I don't want to speak for my colleagues, but it sounds it's more palatable as a designation for that rather than CRs or CG. So how does that work? I mean, we would be changing, if we would go forward with something that included the mixed use one without having a conversation with the applicant and they're not able to participate in this part of the discussion, is that okay? is that permitted? I mean, would that?
Yeah. So
that's too
generally, on a normal, what I would say comp plan zone change, the question before the commission is, yes or no on the applicant's request. On an annexation, it's slightly different. So the code is asking you to make a recommendation to the council on the most appropriate zone for this property upon annexation.
Okay.
So this is the one time you can make a recommendation to city council that's different than what the applicant's requesting or what this staff is bringing forward. And then it will just ultimately be up to the council. They'll have, again, their own hearing, and they'll consider the zoning and if it's appropriate to annex the property.
Okay, that's good to know. We're still in deliberations. We still have this original recommendation from staff as the motion.
Is there, well, can we clarify that, Commissioner President? Which I thought there was a amendment made?
Well, they haven't made that motion yet. So the motion that's on the table is the staff's recommendation to deny the 1.8 CG all multifamily. So what's in our report? Commissioner Ekus, did you have a question?
Well, I was just going to say where I think I'm at.
Okay.
I think the issue, as Commissioner Levin positioned it, is how wide a net do you want to cast? Because I do believe that allowing some degree of services, commercial services, is appropriate in an area like this.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to cast that wide a net. And to me, that's the issue, is how wide a net do you want to cast? I don't feel comfortable adding even with the restrictions. And it seems to me that the MU1, in terms of what's allowed, fits more with what I think is appropriate there, because I think this is more like a neighborhood hub than anything else. And it seems like, since we don't have that category, the MU1 is more appropriate. So I'm sympathetic with the idea of having some commercial there, but I don't want to cast a really wide net. So I think I would support the MU1, or I would support the staff recommendation with the hope that later on the applicant would come back and pursue a neighborhood hub or something, or ask for another designation for commercial there. But that's where I'm at on this.
It's good thoughts. Commissioner Slater, followed by Commissioner Levin.
So I don't know if now is the best time, but I would be interested in making a substitute motion. And maybe Commissioner Levin wants to go first before I go ahead and try that.
Commissioner Levin.
Yeah, why not? I don't support the MU1 idea, and I think it's important to remember the size and scope of the parcel of land that we're talking about. And for a commercial development, 1.8 acres, if it's a multi-development site and everything has to access off of the
Lunar.
the description wrong, but a collector street like Lunar, the scope of the occupant is going to be driven by some of those restrictions on what types of vehicles, what types of processes, what utilities are available. So to say that the CG zone does allow manufacturing or some version of distribution, I would caution that if you look at the site, there's roughly only about 32,000 square feet of building that can be developed there. If you were following like a general rule of thumb for a responsible site development that allows circulation and a site that fully functions. Other developers that we have seen come before us will cram as much building on there as the code allows, which is well above that 40%. But just using that 40% rule, we're not talking about a lot of building square footage. So the idea of, a manufacturer, well, it's going to be more like a maker space. It's going to be something small. It's not going to be a large industrial plant, boiling rubber or something of that nature, it's going to be smaller uses. So I think, and from what we've seen around the city in the CG zone, those heavy uses don't fit. They're simply not applicable. So I'm very comfortable with making a motion to amend and
what we could do, because
boy,
you've got
I
a
don't know
motion
how
to
to amend
approve.
that now.
Yeah, you've got a motion on the table to approve the staff report, which denies the CG for the 1 point.
Yes.
And we have a second on that. Correct me, Lisa and Tom. We could take a vote on that, see what happens to that, and then take a different motion. I think Commissioner Slater is working on something too, maybe with Levin.
I think that's the cleanest way that we move forward, but I would like, as we're in deliberations, I would like to hear what Commissioner Slater has in his head, and then maybe
We'll
we
move forward.
proceed with that vote.
Sounds good, Commissioner Levin. Commissioner Slater.
I think that makes sense to take a vote on the motion that we have,
Okay.
dispose of it and move forward.
Okay, any more conversation on that motion before I ask Shelby to call the roll? Shelby, will you call the roll on the motion before us, which is to approve the staff recommendation?
Ron has a question.
Commissioner Ekus. You're muted. I can't hear.
Sorry for that. I'm trying to get my head around the process because it would seem to me that if we've got a motion to adopt the staff recommendation, then what we ought to do, we ought to proceed with amendments to that first.
We could do that, or we could, just to keep it cleaner, vote it up or down. I think I know where the vote's going to go.
Well, I'm not sure that that's.
We can do a motion to amend.
Given the choice between nothing and this, I'm voting different. I may vote different than if it's got an amendment.
Yeah.
Or that, or my vote may be it could be misinterpreted why I vote for this because I got no other alternative right now.
Tom or Lisa, do you want to, should I do the motion to amend and then vote for the underlying motion first and then the motion to amend, or does it matter?
Currently there isn't anything in front of you before the commission other than the original motion.
Right.
So it's made of the motion to amend, and no one has seconded that motion. So there's really not anything other than the one motion for you to consider.
Could I take a motion to amend in a second now?
If you want to.
Or I could do it. I know that there will be Commissioner Ekus.
Let me tell you what I'd prefer, and we don't have to go in this direction. But I guess we have a motion that doesn't have a second, so that's not there.
We don't have
a second. We have a motion with a second for the staff.
You do. Was that Commissioner Levin's motion?
It was seconded by Ekus. It was Commissioner Levin's motion to approve the staff recommendation, which denies.
Okay, right. But we don't have that was not a motion to amend.
Correct.
So
that's the original motion.
We do not have any motion at this point to amend.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
So, all right. Okay.
So, are you comfortable, Commissioner Ekus, if I move forward with just taking one motion at a time? There will be another motion.
I will vote on this based on there not being any other motion.
Yeah, and I think you've made your point really clear on your comfort with the motion or discomfort with the motion for the record. Any other discussion on this motion? Just before I ask Shelby.
Quick question, sorry to drag this out.
No problem.
So if it is a 2-2 tie, it fails, is that correct?
Yeah, they're just purpose.
Okay, and if I were to vote in favor of the motion and it fails, I could then move to have it reconsidered at a later time, is that correct?
You could, yep. Commissioner,
well,
at a later
sorry.
you're
maybe
on the
Tom's going to
video.
jump in. If the motion fails, then there need to be another motion. It's not like nothing happens. The commission
Right.
has to decide
Right.
something tonight. So there'd have to be another motion until there was. a
I
possible one.
understand, but it would allow us to return to this option if we couldn't reach any other option.
Because
Yes.
you made the motion. Yeah.
Yes.
Gotcha.
At a
Okay,
different
thank you.
Okay. So Shelby, would you call the roll? Signify by saying aye if you're in favor of the motion. Staff recommendation denying the 1.8 CG, or a nay if you're opposed.
Commissioner Ekis,
Aye.
Commissioner Griggs,
Nay.
Commissioner Levin,
Nay.
and Commissioner Slater.
Well, I'm glad I get to vote last. I'm an aye for the purposes of reconsidering.
Okay. So do we have another motion on the table? That motion tied and so it does not pass. Commissioner Slater.
Thank you. So I would, and please, Lisa or Tom, correct me if I'm doing this wrong, but I would like to move the applicant's recommendation with the amendment that general commercial be converted to RM1, MU, excuse me, MU1.
Okay, do we have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Ika's. Discussion on the motion. Would you like to talk to your motion, Commissioner Slater?
We've had a lot of conversation. I just think that it is the most palatable option, to borrow our chair's phrase, for this particular neighborhood.
And I see Tom's hands raised. That means he's going to let us know something.
No, I'm going to ask a question. Does staff understand the motion sufficiently so that they can put it into effect if it passes?
Yes,
it.
we would substitute MU1 for CG.
Got it.
But the other recommendations by staff would then remain in place. Is that correct?
Yes, that condition the trip cap.
Trip cap remains. The recommendation would be for mixed use comp plan and mixed use 1 zoning.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay. Discussion on any other discussion on that motion before us? Commissioner Levin, sorry. Didn't see your hand.
Is it fair, or I will note, I guess, for the record that I have the City of Salem website up on my screen and I'm reading the zone code so that I'm understanding of what the specific contents are of the MU1, which is not in our packet. So I feel like my reading that should be disclosed, that I have all the zones up next to each other. And it still concerns me at how restrictive the MU1 zone is for things that are still seem like they'd be reasonable to be adjacent to the neighborhood.
Can you give us examples of what you're seeing? Because the site's not very big.
Yeah, well, at least outpatient medical is allowed. It does eliminate the that entire section of motor vehicle, trailer, and manufactured dwelling sales and service, as described in the CG. One thing I do like about it that I will say is that it does allow some standard of commercial parking, which if there was park and ride facility or something, they would have to have some kind of building because it can't be standalone surface only. But there's some potential because it's so close to freeway and whatnot. But so many, I don't think people realize how many businesses fall under the description of like general manufacturing. Okay, at least general manufacturing is allowed up to 5,000 square feet. No mini storage is allowed. I think that's problematic just because having actually a proven business model to put mini storage next to multifamily. The other heavy industrial stuff, I would expect none of that would be allowed in the CG zone. So that makes sense that none of that's allowed here. It's close, but I'm very much on the fence, and I feel like I need convincing of why this would be an acceptable recommendation to council, knowing that council could completely throw out our decision or recommendation, but they do tend to follow what we advise them.
Sometimes.
Could I get maybe some feedback from Commissioner Slater on his thoughts about why this is suited, and maybe other commissioners' thoughts before we vote?
Well, I'm always happy to give an opinion. I think that I think the council is going to have a hard time not trying to turn the whole thing into RM2. I think that's going to be their inclination. And I think that we all are in general agreement that it makes sense to have services there. And the most compatible service with that is the mixed use. And so I feel like, if we allowed a wider net, that might hurt us at council. I'm also concerned about some of the uses that were in the more restrictive category, including things like crematoriums. And you and I might be probably a little bit different in that I have a problem with mini storages, on a major street. That just seems like not the best use of that lot. So I think the mixed use was designed for this kind of thing. And I think there's a good argument to make. And I think that ultimately staff might get behind it. So that's where I'm coming from.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Whether that's persuasive or not, I don't know.
Very persuasive. Commissioner Ekus.
Thanks. The storage issue caught me because I thought in the staff's presentation, they said that there was a storage facility close by. Is that not mini storage, or didn't they say there was a?
Lisa.
Yeah, Pamela pointed out next door, built in the county in an industrial zone, there's mini storage. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Good point, Ekus. Commissioner Ekus. I'm in favor of the motion. I think that I know that we're not supposed to anticipate a neighborhood hub because it's not law yet, but it is so similar in uses for that multifamily area. So I would be supportive of the motion when we do call for a vote. And I think Commissioner Slater was much more convincing than I was. Any more discussion on this motion before we have Shelby call the roll? And again, this motion before us that was made by Slater, seconded by Ekus, is basically the staff recommendation, except industrial would switch to MU1 for that 1.8 acres. Everything else stands the same with the same condition one. Shelby, will you please call the roll? Signify by saying aye if you're in favor. Nay if you're opposed.
Commissioner Ekus,
Aye.
Commissioner Griggs,
Aye.
Commissioner Levin,
I'm going to vote nay.
and Commissioner Slater.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion passed. Thank you for your time, Mr. Schaefer and Mr. Peltz.
Thank you, everyone.
Take care. We'll move on to item 5.2, CPZ ZC 22-04 on 3821 Ibex Street Northeast. Any ex parte contacts or potential conflicts of interest to declare? Seeing none. Statement of criteria. Shelby, would you please read that?
This is a public hearing to consider a minor comprehensive plan change and zone change, case number CPC ZC 22-04 for a property located at 3821 Ibex Street Northeast. The criteria applicable to this application are found in the Salem Revised Code, SRC Chapter 260.045B for land use designations. Failure to raise an issue prior to the close of the public hearing with statements or evidence sufficient to afford the Planning Commission and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue precludes appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals, LUBA, on that issue. A similar failure to raise constitutional issues relating to proposed conditions of approval precludes an action for damages in circuit court. Prior to the conclusion of the hearing, any participant may request an opportunity to present additional evidence or testimony. The Planning Commission will then either continue the public hearing or leave the record open for at least 7 days.
Thank you, Shelby. Ms. Cole, you're up.
All right, so is everyone seeing that all right?
Yes.
All right. So this case is comprehensive plan change and zone change. Sorry, I have to turn my video back on and I can't get to that little bit. Okay, there we go. Too much information on my screen, sorry. So this one is case CPC ZC 2204 for 3821 Ibex Street. I'm Pamela Cole, case manager for the proposed annexation and concurrent comprehensive plan change and zone change. And request that the staff report and attachments and presentation be entered into the record. So this property is associated with annexation ANXC 750. And again, normally territory that's annexed into the city is giving a comprehensive plan designation and zone designation equivalent to the applicable county zoning in table 260-1, unless either there's an inconsistency between that equivalent city zoning and the comprehensive plan designation, or the petitioner requests a new comprehensive plan designation or zone designation. So in this case, there is a bit of an inconsistency, and to resolve that, the applicant is proposing parks, open space, and outdoor recreation for the comprehensive plan and public amusement zoning. This would allow for expansion of the abutting Fisher Road Park. So the staff recommendation to council will follow, and Planning Commission has the option to discuss and either approve what staff's recommendation is or make a different recommendation. This one also is designated multifamily in the comprehensive plan. Marion County urban development zoning isn't a direct equivalent to that under the code that was in effect at the time this application was submitted. So that's an inconsistency that we're resolving with the applicant's proposal. So this one is located between Fisher Road Northeast and Lancaster Drive Northeast, and the subject property in the crosshatch there is abutting the Fisher Road Park, which is already in the city just to the west. This would be presented to City Council later this year, we hope. We don't have an official case date yet for that. And the red dash line again is indicating the city limits on the west side of this property. Fisher Road is a collector, and Ward Drive to the north is a collector. I'm sorry, is a minor arterial. And then Lancaster, of course, is a major arterial. So it has quite a bit of street access nearby on those higher order streets. Ibex Street, which runs directly into the park, is a local street and under improved with only a 20-foot or 25-foot wide improvement and a 30-foot wide right of way. And the park at this point is not proposing a public vehicle access from Ibex Street, only a pedestrian access. So right now this property is undeveloped. It previously had a dwelling, but that dwelling has been demolished. To the north and south, we have apartments. There's also a manufactured home park a little further to the southwest. And to the west, we have a new apartment complex on Fisher Road at Ward, which is also coming to council for annexation just in a few weeks, and other land that is vacant and potentially developable for multifamily housing. There are some single family residences on Ibex itself. Right now, the property has quite a few trees, while the existing park is more open. The subject property and all the surrounding properties are designated multifamily residential in the comp plan. The Planning Commission recommendation forwarded to Council has recommended parks, open space, and outdoor recreation comprehensive designation for Fisher Road Park to the west. So the proposal for this property would be consistent with the designation proposed for Fisher Road Park. The zoning of this property and some of the others just to the east and south is urban development. Most of the others that are still in Marion County or Marion County multiple family, with a few Marion County single family just on Ibex Street. And current zoning of the park is public amusement. And there's quite a bit still of City of Salem RM2 zoning over on Fisher Road that's potentially developable. So in this case, the proposed comprehensive plan designation would apply to the entire property, and the zone change would apply to the entire property. Northgate commented in support of the comp plan and zone change for the enlargement of the park. We haven't received any written testimony from citizens. We did have a few questions, but no written testimony. And as far as I know, we don't have anyone signed up to testify this evening. And the property is not subject to a homeowners association. We didn't receive any agency comments from outside the city. City Department, the Public Works Development Services Division indicated there's no significant impact on existing transportation, and any site-specific infrastructure requirements would be addressed in site plan review. Fire Department had no concerns, but Fire Department access and water supply could be required at the time of the development, and Building and Safety had no comments. So in this case, it's a little bit different than the previous one. We do have a precedent for changing properties to parks, open space, and outdoor recreation for park expansions away from residential, and to apply public amusement zoning for park expansions. So we feel that we found that the proposed designations would allow logical expansion of that park, and the park designations are compatible with the abutting park and the surrounding residential development. The existing and proposed multi-family developments have generated more demand for parks and open space. And the proposed designations are in the public interest because they would allow expansion of the park. It would be a neighborhood park that serves that growing population within a 1/2 mile service area. And the designations are consistent with the location and character. Therefore, in this case, staff recommends that the designations be changed to multifamily, or from multifamily residential to parks, open space, and outdoor recreation, and to City of Salem public amusement zoning. That's the end of this presentation. Of course, I'm available for questions.
Thank you, Pamela. Questions for Pamela? Commissioner Levin.
Has Public Works given indication that they have an acceptable budget to maintain this additional parkland?
We do have a representative from Parks who's speaking as the applicant, and she may be able to answer those questions better than staff and planning is able to.
That'll be fine.
Yes, we do have added budget. We currently have a budget to maintain Fisher Road. It is an undeveloped park, so it doesn't receive as many visits as a developed park, but we are going out to the site this week to take a look and see what needs to be done and what can be done in a pretty recent, fairly soon on the site.
Okay, we'll move to you in just a moment, Tony. Any other questions of staff? Seeing none, would the applicant, Tony, it's good to see you. It's been a while. Like to speak, and you have 15 minutes. And name and
Thank you, President Griggs. Good to see you too, and members of the commission. My name is Tony Whitler. I am a parks planner with the city, and please forgive my voice. I've caught a little cold. Tonight, I am requesting the annexation and comprehensive plan and zone change for the Ibex Street property, as Pamela noted. It's just slightly under 2 acres and it abuts Fisher Road Park. We purchased it in the fall of 2020. And the owner actually came to us because he was very, he was going to be selling the property and he didn't want the trees to be removed. And he wanted went to the city first, hoping that we would take the property because we would manage the trees on the site. And of course, we saw such a great opportunity to expand Fisher Road Park because we do, as Pam mentioned, there's so much multifamily moving in that area, and we want to meet those needs. And just quickly before I forget, I want to tack on to a couple of things that Pam said in the comments. I did also hear from the police. I want to just add to the comments that were received. The police department said, as far as any calls that come in, they always go to Marion County Sheriff and Salem PD. So whether it's now before it's annexed or following the annexation, that will remain true for the site as a whole. And then also, then to continue on, Fisher Road Park and Ibex, once it's annexed, is classified in our comprehensive park system master plan as a neighborhood park. It serves the local area, half-mile service area. There is no off-street parking. So the entrances on either side will be PED entrances. So the Ibex Street entrance would have a couple of bollards that wouldn't be accessed by a vehicle there. And so the additional acreage supports the growing multifamily development. And this park site just south of Ward is really the only park property for quite a ways, about a mile east. There's no other park property, and then south down to Silverton. So we really do need this availability. We also will be master planning this park site in fiscal year 2023. So probably come spring, we'll be conducting a master plan that will involve the neighbors within the half-mile service area to try to get moving on this park. And then just to add on the park planning, just a little more information when we do master plan the site, that the public always provides their vision for the park, and we always take that into consideration as we develop, and also include the comprehensive park system master plan criteria for design that we follow as well. And I hope I covered everything. Please, if you have any questions.
Sure.
I'm happy to answer.
Questions for Tony, so we can save her voice. Commissioner Slater. I bet you were happy about her tree comment, weren't you?
I was, and I'm going to follow up on it by asking, is there some agreement with the previous owner on how those are to be protected, or is that written into the purchase agreement, or is it just a handshake?
No, well, we protect trees on our park site. So unless it's a hazardous tree, we don't remove the trees. So that's just our standard practice. Just barring anything hazardous. Okay. Yeah. So I think it's a wonderful site because it's very well shaded. Fisher Road Park has a couple of young trees and some shrubs, and it's pretty open. So this actually is a nice
compliment.
Thank you. Compliment to the park. And it could be just something very passive with trails and picnic benches, and I see it as really having a lot of potential for the neighbors.
Great.
Follow up? You're good? Yeah. Any other questions? Commissioner Levin.
Earlier, you said that to my question to city staff that Public Works had the money for maintaining the parks. My question stems from a meeting with other city staff as the presentation of the new bond measure that's going to be proposed. And a part of the pie that was divvied up for those bond funds was what was presented as needed funds for public works to maintain parks because they don't have the money to maintain parks. So there's an inconsistency between that statement and what you just said earlier.
Well, if I could clarify what that means exactly. So for the bond projects, we identify projects that we can't use SDCs for. So SDCs are for growth related, but we do have facilities that can be upgraded in our parks. So the bond does provide for that. Now, whether we have staff to maintain that, I believe Jennifer Keller has really done a great job. She has money in the budget every year to look at certain parks and make improvement every year. And she has been doing that since she's been in charge there. And she's made great headway, actually. And then we also have our Salem Park Improvement Fund program, which came out of what we used to call deferred maintenance funds and match it with a neighborhood matching grant. And that makes a lot of great improvements too. So honestly, I think Jennifer Keller's done a great job of incorporating money and making these improvements each year, but the bond's just going to allow us a larger pot of money to do even more and get ahead.
Do you have a follow-up, Commissioner Ben?
I do, yes. With the pending establishment of the park grounds on Fisher Road, the idea that there is no park that serves this area will be resolved by the establishment of that Fisher Road Park, which is already a park grounds and open. So it is used as park grounds, and there's additional space that may not be labeled as park grounds, but it is very clearly across on the other side of Fisher Road is used as park by neighbors in the community. So does the city really see, or sorry, does Public Works really see a need to have this additional piece of land? I'm struggling with this because I come from the position that the city has more parks than they are maintaining. And we have park grounds that are going to be officially recognized on Fisher Road. And we've been hearing a lot about the need for multifamily land. And if the city owns this and chose to annex it into the city, well, if they just did a straight annexation, it'd be multifamily zoned land, and that would add to our multifamily zone land inventory. And there's already a park there. So I'm struggling with how this is such a necessity that and I understand that the city has already purchased, but I'm struggling at even if the city already owns it, identifying it as park grounds requires the obligation of public funds start to be spent in the maintenance and care of that. And if we're adding to our obligations as far as public commitment, there's already a park that needs to be maintained, and we need to see what those costs look like. So I have concern about this. Can you
isn't there sort of to your question for Tony, isn't there a sort of a ratio of how much parkland in a development that is expected, and is this meeting that shortfall? That's as much as I know. And
I like that approach.
We do have in our comprehensive park system master plan, we try to meet the current and future population. And when we identified in the most recent update, we identified 7 acres per 1,000 parkland, and that comes in the form of 2.5 acres neighborhood, 2.25 acres neighborhood, 2.25 acres community, and 2.5 acres urban. And yes, I agree that there are properties that are not developed yet and just receive that minimal maintenance. But when opportunities arise, especially in areas of such high need, this particular area, the census tract identifies a very high population, almost 50% poverty level, and a very low median age range, like 23.5 years. It's really important to have enough property to provide for that use. So having this additional property, we take any opportunity we have to have something that we can develop in the future for our residents as the city grows. It's so important. And I realize that multifamily is very important right now, but we also need to provide some space for those folks moving into the area. And really the 4.85 acres of the Fisher Road side could be more developed with active activities. And then the other shaded area off Ibex could be the more passive picnic area. It really, I think it really could work quite nicely. And that's really we plan ahead. We have to, or we'll lose our opportunities to have open space for our residents, and they desperately need it. They need that space. Children need space for creative and imaginative play. They need to get out of their homes and have that open space.
Thanks, Tony. Did you have a follow-up on that, Commissioner Levin? You're good? Okay.
Nope, we're good.
Okay, Commissioner Slater.
Thank you, Tony. Just a quick question, especially since you mentioned open and creative play. Has the city put in place a nature play policy yet?
No, but we're getting close.
Okay.
So I'm master planning the Bailey Ridge Park plan, and that has nature play in the master plan. We are very behind in that. So we're very excited to have something put in place. And when we update our comprehensive park system master plan in another year or so, we'll incorporate that as part of our policy work.
So if I can follow up.
Sure.
So is it fair to say that the city is accepting that nature play will be part of the park development options that people have, even if the policy isn't finished yet?
Oh, very much so. If it works with the topography of the site and how the park lays out, definitely nature play is very important.
That was a change from a little while ago, so that's good to hear. Thank you.
Any other questions for Tony?
I would like to go back and say that adults as well as children need that open space for creative and imaginative play, not just children.
Adults of all child's ages, yes. Any more questions for Tony before we move on to nobody signed up to testify, no neighborhood associations? Questions of staff? Not seeing anybody's hand raised. And so there's nothing to rebut, Tony, so I'm going to take you off the hook and save your voice.
Thank you.
Anyway, and would the applicant like to keep the record open?
No.
I did not think so. I'm going to close the
Thank you.
close the hearing, and I'm going to look to Commissioner Levin for a motion.
Sorry, I'm slow clicking through the screens. I'll make a motion that we approve the application case number CPC-ZC 22-04.
Great.
Second.
Who was the second?
Slater.
Slater, thank you. Discussion on the motion. I think it's pretty self-explanatory. Shelby, would you please call the roll, signify by saying aye if you're in favor of the motion, nay if you're opposed.
Commissioner Ekus,
Aye.
Commissioner Goebel,
Aye.
Commissioner Griggs,
Aye.
Commissioner Levin,
Aye.
and Commissioner Slater.
Aye.
Thank you, Shelby. Motion passed. Take care of yourself, Tony.
Thank you, everyone.
You bet.
Thank you.
Moving on, we have no special orders of business, nor information reports, no public comment. Lisa, Planning Administrator's report.
Just as I said before, our Salem hearing was actually closed. The written record was held open at the City Council to July 11th. So they're still taking written testimony on that. And we do have 2 items on our July 5th meeting. And I think President Griggs will be gone, right?
Yep.
So hopefully we'll have quorum and others can show up. It's kind of a bad day, I know, right after the holiday, but we do have 2 more cases, 2 more annexations and comp plan zone changes related to annexations.
You have a question from Commissioner Slater.
Yeah, so Lisa, I think you or someone has previously provided some reports for us on, new home construction, or the just kind of how the volume of new homes, whether it's multifamily, single family, are coming online in the city. Do you have updates, or maybe just what the most recent numbers are?
Off the top of my head, I don't. We do get the Building and Safety Division puts out a monthly report of all the permits that have been approved, and they have them categorized by like single family dwelling, whether it's a new house or an addition, accessory dwelling units, multifamily, and how many units are in that multifamily. So I could start providing that. They send it out every month. That's what I look at, because there's generally a lag between us maybe approving the land use and then when the permits come in. And because I don't review, permits, I don't necessarily know that, oh, that thing we had a whole hearing on a year ago. Sometimes I drive by and I'm like, oh, they've already cool, they built it. So for volume and to kind of see where we're at, I get that report from Building and Safety every month after the month closes. And it has some historical data on it too, so you can go back and see kind of where we're trending and compared to past years. So I can provide that, send that on if the commissioners be interested
So if
in
I can follow up.
Yes, you may.
So Councillor Phillips made a comment, and I'm sure you were there at one of the recent council meetings, and maybe it was the land use, maybe it was the Salem. He was talking about in conversations with other people about the regional need for housing, and he said he did the math and he was looking at, Salem needed to add 5,000 units, and I wasn't sure if that's 5,000 units of a year or where that number came from, but that just seemed like a fairly modest number. Like, can we really meet our needs with 5,000? And so I'm wondering from you, like in a year where we have a housing needs, like how does 5,000 figure into what is yearly made available or comes online?
Yeah, I don't know off the top of my head, so I could pull up that report and send it. I don't know that we have a regional number, but we will soon because the state is requiring us to do a regional housing needs analysis coming up soon with our regional partners. So then we will have a number more for the region. But right now what we have is for our Salem. So I mean, we could take the number of how many units they say we need over the planning horizon and then like divide it by year and see where that gets us.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Did you have any more to add to your report? I think I felt like I kind of cut you off.
No, I'm done. Thank you.
So I have a question. How's that vacancy, COPCHO vacancy going?
I have not heard. The Boards and Commissions Committee met, and then they appointed some folks to various commissions, and they have not invited anybody for an interview yet.
Okay.
So still taking applications, I guess. That's all I would say is tell folks maybe they felt like they didn't have a sufficient pool to do an interview.
Okay.
But I will reach out to the mayor and remind him because we definitely need our full commission.
Yeah, he needs to deal with it before he leaves.
Exactly.
And I should have said something to Pamela. I'm sorry I caught her I didn't catch her before she went off. Congratulating her on her retirement. That's wonderful.
Well, she will be back on the 5th. Those are her 2 cases, and she's retiring, I think, the week. Oh, you won't be there. That's right. Well, yes.
Commissioner Levin will be in
here
charge.
A long time, and we're sad to see her go.
Okay. And then just a little bit off topic. Commissioner Slater and I saw each other today and just talked about how great it would be to do something together, social, backyard at some point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That would be great. Before the pandemic, we did have Christmas parties together with the HLC every year, holiday parties. So that was always fun. Also, I know we talk kind of every meeting about if we can go back to in-person meetings. So I think the city manager is close to creating a policy that would allow the planning commission to decide to be fully in person. So there's a draft policy out there. We've given comments on it. I think it's going to be adopted soon. And then if so, it would be up to the commission if you all I don't know how you would want to do it, take a vote or whatever. But if you decided that you wanted to be in person, but again, we wouldn't have the option for hybrid. So it would be like totally pre-COVID. It would either be
Right.
fully in person, none of it would be on YouTube. People would have to come in person, commissioners, public, everybody,
Mhm.
or you can stay on Zoom. So that would be the
So it'd be an
choice.
agenda item for discussion, I would think, because I would love to hear what.
Yep. So as soon as the policy is adopted, then I'll let you know, President Griggs, and we can
Okay.
put it on the agenda to discuss.
Anything for the good of the order? Peeps. Commissioner Akers.
Yeah, thank you. Recall the last some previous meetings, we had discussion about the sign code, particularly lawn signs and political lawn signs. And
Yes.
I did some research since then, and we do have in our code lawn restrictions related to lawn signs that talk about 60 days they can be up.
Yes.
But I started looking at other cities, and there's an awful lot of cities, major cities in Oregon, and that the common practice seems to be having some specific language on lawn signs specific to elections, political lawn signs specific to elections. I think the reason for that is that elections have a specific date. And so you can have a policy for carved out for political signs using those particular dates and setting a time when they can be put up, and particularly a time afterward in which they have to be taken down or required to be taken down. And ours seems to be very general. So I'm going to try and do some more research. I've talked to Lisa about this. I'll be trying to work with staff, and I may have some amendments to propose or suggest to the sign code that add some language specific to elections, probably keeping the 60 days and allowing a period of time, perhaps 5 to 15 days for them to be taken down. But it would amend it so that there is a part of the lawn sign, part of the sign code that refers specifically to political sign policy as opposed to just general lawn sign policy.
Yeah, so to close the loop, because we talked on the phone, I forgot, I was thinking we talked in this meeting. Yeah, we don't limit the political signs. So I know there was a kind of question before if we did. And so it is like temporary signs, lawn signs are limited to 60 days, but we don't regulate the content. And Commissioner Akers had asked about other cities do this and say political signs. And I said, oh, that's a good question. I'll have to check with Tom. And then I didn't call you Tom. So here's Tom turning on his camera. So maybe you have a response.
Well, so you're right to be concerned about differentiating signage by content. And so, we'll certainly take a look at what other jurisdictions are doing. Sometimes those kinds of rules are vestigial in nature. They were put into the code many years ago, and they aren't enforced, and so they live on, but they aren't actually viable. So we'll take a look at that, and you have to remember that what may be allowable outside of Oregon is not generally allowable inside of Oregon, because the Oregon Constitution provides greater protection for speech than does the First Amendment. So governments are restricted pretty substantially as far as trying to regulate as to content.
Okay, if I could
Sure.
add to that. This is, I didn't look at other states. I looked at cities in Oregon.
Okay, well, we'll certainly take a look at it.
If you have a legal opinion somewhere that you can cite, or a Supreme Court decision, or Attorney General's opinion that says you can't have rules that apply to elections, and I'd like to see it, and I'd like to know that legal analysis, because it only says we say 60 days for a lawn sign. I don't know that saying 60 days before an election, I don't know that referring to signs that are particular to an election is necessarily a violation of free speech. It's just a regulation of when these particular types of signs can go up. And there's both 60 days. I'm not sure that there's a problem here.
Well, so we'll take a
There
look at what
there are
your-
other
your-
problems. There are other problems that I can see with the 60 days. Because it's not tagged to a particular date. All you're doing is tagging things to a particular type of sign to a particular date. You're not prohibiting, you're prohibiting them from being put up before that.
Right.
But I don't know that that raises the free speech issue. So if you've got any legal opinions on that, I'd like to see them.
Well, you've heard them already.
I'd like to see written legal opinions on this.
Well, we'll take a look at what you've got and we'll render an opinion about whether it'll pass muster.
Sounds good, Tom. Any other comments for the good of the order? Otherwise, y'all will see each other July 5th. Thank you, Commissioner Levin, for covering. And the meeting's adjourned.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night. Thank
Bye.
you.